Today, my guest is Dr. Nadine Macaluso, also known as Dr. Nay. She is the former wife of the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, and we go over her experience with the movie, having Margot Robbie talk to her, what is a pathological lover, why she doesn't like the term narcissist, what the Romeo and Dirty John cycle is, as well as much more. And with that, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dr. Nay as much as I did. Dr. Nay, how are you this afternoon?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. I know you've been talking to a lot of people about your book and your experience, of course, being the wife of the Wolf of Wall Street. Has this all been surreal for you?
I think my whole life has been surreal. Honestly, you know, it's such a strange thing because I lived through this quintessential trauma bond. That was a real Greek tragedy. And when I got out of it, I was like, okay, phew, done with that. And I moved to California and I went back to school, got my master's and all that, my doctorate. But while I was getting my master's and doctorate was when the book came out, The Wolf of Wall Street, and the movie came out. And so luckily for me, I'd done so much work on myself, but it was a lot to hold and contain for sure. But I was also mostly concerned for my kids. And as long as they were okay, then I was okay. And now it's great. I get to use it to help women everywhere. So I love it.
Absolutely. And another interesting thing about your story is you basically shifted careers at 39 years old. How was that? I think a lot of people get worried about that kind of thing. Oh, I'm getting older. I don't want to try something new. But how did you do that?
Yeah. So you know what happened? I was living in Los Angeles and I was in the garment business, which is very trendy and there's a lot of ageism. And I just thought to myself, I knew that therapy had saved my life because when I was in my relationship with my ex, as soon as I met him, I put myself right into therapy because I was like, there's no way I can handle this guy. There's no way I can handle this life. And I believe therapy allowed me to survive it. So when I was living in Los Angeles, I was meditating and I just was like, I'm going to go back to school to be a therapist. And I just did.
I love that. It takes courage to try something new and go all out like that, but I love that.
Yeah, yeah. And here's the thing. If you just put one foot in front of each other every day and you just show up to class and write the papers, and then little by little, you get to accomplish your goal.
Absolutely. I think another interesting point is you mentioned in another show that you get along with Jordan now. Like you guys co-parent well together. I think that's important to emphasize too, I think. How do you guys do that?
Well, the interesting thing is that, in a trauma bond, there's usually a power imbalance, right? So he clearly had the power and I did not. But once he got arrested, the power imbalance shifted.
Ah,
Right. And so I think he gained a lot of humility at that point, and our relationship shifted, and we've just always put our kids first. It's just something that we both really agreed about. That doesn't mean we've always gotten along perfectly. We're two strong-willed individuals, but I would say through everything, we've been able to put them first, and it shows because they're two amazing young adults.
that's amazing. I think that gives people some hope too, because I always say co-parenting with a narcissist or a pathological lover, as you would like to call them,
Yeah.
that's hard. That's something that you're attached to them till at least they're 18, but probably more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and not every person in a trauma bond gets lucky that their ex gets arrested. Right. So I kind of got lucky with that, seriously. No, and I work with tons of women who the co-parenting situation is extraordinarily challenging. But just like anything, there are ways to get through it.
Right. And in preparation for the movie, did Margot Robbie speak to you about doing the role?
Yeah, she did, because they called me up and I hadn't spoken to them really till right up until the movie was, I think they were about to film it. And they called, I was swimming in my backyard. This was a surreal moment. And they called me up and they said, hey, it's Martin Scorsese's office. And I said to them, it's about fucking time you called. I said, you're going to make a movie about my life and you're not going to talk to me? And I said, but don't worry, I'm not going to sue you. That's not, I said, the only thing I'm concerned about is my children. And then they spoke to me and then they said, Margot would love to meet you to get your accent. And I was like, oh my God, this Brooklyn accent that I've been trying to get rid of my whole life, somebody's going to imitate it. So I flew to New York to take my daughter to college, and I got to meet with her. She was 22, the age I was. She was so young and beautiful and very sweet. Remember, she wasn't famous yet, right?
I
This was
forget. That's true.
this was her breakout role. And so they taped my accent, and we went to dinner. And she said to me, I really am afraid to tell Leo and Martin I don't want to be naked. And she's like, I'm nervous to say it to them. And I said, that fear right there, speaking truth to power, you embody that, you'll get how I felt every day.
Oh, wow. That's a good way to put it, too.
Yeah,
And did she stand up for herself with that? I don't think she got naked in that movie, did she?
she did a little bit. She did a
Okay.
little bit. I mean, listen, again, I'm sure they weren't going to listen to her, but she, I think she did a great job playing me.
Okay. And what were your thoughts overall about the movie as you watched it? It probably was pretty
Yeah,
traumatic for you, even.
it wasn't because I got to see it at a private screening in Paramount Studios. My current husband and I went, and so we sat down and I was like, okay, this is weird. We watched it and it was okay because it really just showed me as a young girl who fell madly in love, who loved her kids and was chasing this maniac around and then got sick of it, right? Finally at the end and left him. And so it didn't show the depth of my character or my perspective or narrative clearly, but I was fine with it. I was fine with it.
Okay, cool. And as I just finished reading your book, and you had made a good distinction between a pathological lover, and you also mentioned that they're not all narcissists. What do you
Yeah.
mean when you say that?
Well, this really this one of my pet peeves. I mean, every single person's a narcissist. First of all, not every person's a narcissist. We all have narcissistic traits to an extent, but when you're in a trauma bond, right, and you are being abused, betrayed, harmed, right, and exploited by this person, it takes a very certain type of personality. And so I call them a pathological lover because I believe that anybody that would do that to somebody they love is mentally unwell. So that's what pathological means. And then I break it down into they have a cluster B personality disorder, perhaps narcissism, antisocial personality, borderline, right? But they're often part of a group called the dark tetrad, which I explain, which is an umbrella term for people that have malevolent intentions. And this is what these people have. And it has psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sadism. And so they don't have to have all of them, but they usually have a mix. And at the core of this personality is selfishness, hostility, and antagonism. They can have a compulsive process disorder, sex addiction, right? Gambling. They can have a substance addiction. They can have a mood disorder. They're highly impulsive. So they're much more complicated than just a narcissist.
Right. And I think that's such an important distinction to make because some people get caught up on, oh, NPD is only this percentage of the population, whether it's 1% or 6%, and they get really caught up on that and they use it as a way to dismiss,
Yeah.
oh, if someone says their ex is a narcissist, it's really so rare. How could you possibly say that? And I would say to those people, hey, it doesn't matter if they were a full blown narcissist or not. Were they abusive?
That's
Were
right.
they disrespecting you? Were
That's
they mistreating you, putting you through the cycle of abuse? That's what matters.
And I really wonder, where do we even get that statistic from? I don't think narcissists are going into like the Census Bureau and checking themselves. It's like, hey, I want to count as a narcissist 1 year. Because a lot of times, remember, personality disorders are egosyntonic, meaning that you don't know you have them. It's different than a mood disorder, which is ego dystonic. You're like, I don't want to feel anxious. I don't want to feel depressed. With personality disorders, you're like, this is who I am. So they don't know necessarily that they're disordered
Right.
till everybody tells them.
Exactly. And that's why I think we have no idea how many there really are. Most never get diagnosed anyway.
That's right. Because they never go to therapy unless they go with their partners.
Right. And they get forced by maybe the courts or an
Exactly.
ultimatum by a partner, like you said.
Right. But they don't show up to therapy because they're not self-reflective.
No.
So they're not like, oh, why am I feeling like that today? No.
And this is going to lead right into something another doctor was saying the other day. And I think we talked about this before we started recording. But Dr. Orion Taraban was saying, oh, if a woman says she has a narcissistic ex, that means she's unhealthy. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my God, that's so funny, honestly. I mean, it's not funny in the sense that they're saying that, but it's so ridiculous. You know, one of the reasons why I wrote my book was because there's so much stigma around the victim. And so I wrote my book, and I hope you got that when you read it, to destigmatize the victim, because we're always blaming the victim. She's codependent. She has learned helplessness. She's got a bad picker. And so here's the thing. I grew up in a really calm household. I didn't have a perfect parents, but I had good enough parents. I wasn't yelled at. I wasn't abused. Maybe I was neglected because my parents were 19 and 20. So they were hippies, right? And I was a young girl. My brain was still developing. I was 23. And so to say that I'm responsible or there's something wrong with me for falling for a con artist who's making it his life mission to con me and get me to fall in love with him, I think it's kind of, that's just not my perspective.
Right. And to me, I think it just misunderstands what a trauma bond even is and
Right,
how it works.
right.
They're in that love bombing period, they're mirroring and matching, future faking, being the person that you always wanted. And a lot of people are going to fall for that.
Yeah, because listen, we're social beings. We're built for love. I mean, we're on this planet to evolve and procreate. So, I mean, that's not the only reason we're here, but we're capable of it. And usually we do that because we fall in love. And so our species needs it to survive. And to be in love does feel good when it's healthy. And it does feel beautiful to belong to somebody and to feel like somebody has your back and somebody cares about you. So, I mean, if somebody then presents to you like they're your soulmate and they're going to love you forever and they can meet all your needs and you're a trusting person and you do genuinely feel the same, why would you think you're being conned?
Exactly. And I say to people, anyone that can happen to,
Anybody.
anybody that can happen to. And then they pull the rug later, the mask comes off, and then you see what's underneath. But
That's
a
right.
very important thing that stood out to me in your book was you said, in order to abuse you, they have to understand you.
Yeah. Right, because I mean, and that's kind of a scary, sad thing, but what will happen is that they'll mind map you while they're getting to know you. So they're asking you lots of questions. They're understanding what are your vulnerabilities. So an example of that could be, let's say you had a parent who abandoned you, a father who abandoned you. And so every single time you have a fight, when your partner leaves, you go into panic, right? So instead of the victim being able to say, hey, listen, that really freaks me out. This was my childhood wound. At least when we fight, can we just separate in the same room or can we just pause, right? The pathological person is going to be like, oh no, I'm going to torture you with that. Thanks for giving me that.
Right. And what is mind mapping? You mentioned that in the book too, but what is mind mapping?
It's kind of like having cognitive empathy in a way. It's the fact that you can like literally you're trying to figure out the way somebody's mind works. You know, you and I even right now we're talking, or if I go, well, I'm not going to go on a date because I'm married, but if I was meeting a new person, I'm not trying to figure out how their mind works. I'm just seeing how they present in the now, in the present moment, and taking it at face value. But this person is studying you to understand how you're wired and what your triggers are and what makes you tick.
Right. And any vulnerabilities you display, they're going to throw them in your face. They're going to use them against you, exploit them. And I think that's another thing that people get in trouble with is a pathological lover. They will exploit the parts of you that wants to see the best in them, the part of you that wants to, oh, I want to see the best in other people. I want to give second chances. That's the very part that they exploit.
That's the very part. They will really exploit your empathy. And that's what I say is that a lot of these women that enter into these trauma bonds, again, albeit imperfect, right, with their own triggers, their own childhood issues, but they're trusting, they're loyal, they're pro social, they believe in relationships, those very quality, they're cooperative. those very qualities get weaponized in this relationship.
Right. And what is the Romeo and Dirty John dynamic? I've never heard it called that before.
Oh, you know what? Everybody was calling it Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and all my young girls were like, "Who is that?" So I needed to change it. So what happens in a trauma bond is you first meet Romeo, and he's loving and charming and generous and kind and helpful, and he's everything you thought you could want. Then the mask falls, and we get Dirty John, and that's the cruel, controlling, betraying, pathological, lying partner. And so what happens is that this person 70% of the time, I say, is usually Dirty John, 30% of the time, Romeo. That can change. And that pattern of behavior is called intermittent reinforcement. And that's the actual bonds that creates the trauma bond, is the inconsistency and the never knowing when the love is going to come back.
Yeah. And then the intermittent rewards is why gambling is so addictive, right? Because you just don't know when the reward's going to be.
That's right. That's why I don't like when people call it a cycle of abuse, because if it was a cycle, predicted.
A good point. Good point.
Right.
And I think, yeah, because I mean, I call it the cycle of abuse. So maybe I'll have to think about not saying that.
No, it's just like a pattern. Like it's really intermittent abuse. Right.
That's a better word for it. I mean, because some people also like to say coercive control.
Yeah, coercive control, right? But that's where they're intimidate, dominate, threaten, disparage you, isolate you, micromanage you, because they love you.
Right. I think another thing people don't quite understand is when you're in that trauma bond, what is your mental state? Because a pathological lover, they're going to constantly blame you for everything. Everything's your fault. You can't do anything right. They're going to belittle you, put you down, and then they'll mix in some love bombing again. But what is your mental state in that time?
Yeah, so the mental state is just a mess, right? So you lose yourself because you have to lose yourself to stay connected to this person, because you have to sacrifice your needs, your desires, your values, your wants. Also, you have cognitive dissonance, which is the mental discomfort that you feel, which is created by the two masks. And so you're always asking, is he good? Is he bad? Am I crazy? Is he crazy? Is the relationship good or bad? And the sad part is you really can never answer because of the intermittent abuse. The game's always changing. And so you're very confused. You lose yourself and you can get trauma symptoms.
Right. I think that's what our friend Grace Stewart says. If you're confused, you're being abused.
Oh, I like that. I haven't heard that. I like that.
So that has always stuck out to me. And similar to how, have you heard the analogy about the poop in your soup? Because people, you've never heard this?
You have good ones. Yeah.
So they say people will ask how much abuse is normal in a relationship. And the analogy is abuse in a relationship is like poop in your soup, even the smallest bit, and you wouldn't eat the soup. The same applies for abuse in a relationship.
Good one. I'm going to use these. I love it.
Very good. I got a lot of those one-liners out there.
I like it.
But I like to emphasize the state people are in the trauma bond, because just like that other doctor was saying, it's not so easy once you're in that place just to say, okay, I'm going to do the totally healthy thing. I see disrespect. I'm just going to leave. It's not that simple.
No, it's not that simple. First of all, because we come in with our own personality traits, our own attachment patterns, our own, what we've seen love to be in our family of origin, right? And then we're wired for love. And then this person who says that they are going to love and protect us forever, we believe them. And so it's not like this person, acts like a jerk on the first date. This takes time. And so what happens is that usually by the time you realize that something's wrong, you've already really attached and bonded to this individual. And so they do something wrong, but then they buy you a gift or take you on vacation. You're like, oh, there he is. He's good. And then hope is the hook.
And that's another great part to go over, how they manipulate your hope.
They manipulate your hope. So now your hope, you're like, oh my God, okay, everything's back to normal. Phew. Okay, what I thought was right was right. But then, sure enough, another incident will occur. And then maybe this time they say, I promise it'll never happen again. I see the wrong of my ways and I'm going to change. You give them another chance, right? But then maybe what's happening is you're buying a home together, you're having children together in between these moments. And then you turn around and you're like, how the hell did I get here? And how the hell do I get out?
Mm. You reminded me of the Depeche Mode song that says, "Never again is what you said the time before."
Yeah.
It's like that.
Yeah. Depeche Mode, taking me back.
Yeah,
Please.
I like them. They're one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, in your dynamic, also, addiction played a part on his part too. And I think that's an important thing to go over too.
Yeah, in my marriage, my ex-marriage, as the movie depicts, yes, my ex-husband was a severe drug addict. And so for me, the drug addiction was so front and center. Not that I wasn't affected by the rage, not that I wasn't affected by the coercive control, but that was so big. And back then, nobody was talking about all these terms that we're discussing. They were just like, he's an addict and you're codependent. And I was just like, I think it's more than this. But I certainly didn't have the words, in my 20s, and nobody was giving me them. So I was just like, okay, I guess that's what it is. But we know that substance abuse does not make somebody an abuser. It can exacerbate the way they behave, but it doesn't make someone abusive.
I think that's a very important distinction because I know the pathological personalities, they're going to want to use the addiction as a scapegoat a lot of times. Oh, I'm doing this because I have the disease of addiction,
Yeah.
or we'll fill in the blank, and they'll use that as an excuse for their poor behavior. But
Right.
where would you say for someone to draw the line between those two? Okay, no, this is them with an addiction. They're really trying to get better. But no, this is the abuse part. This is the part where they're a pathological lover or personality.
Well, you'll see, if you end up staying with that partner through their sobriety, and then you see when they come out, they're, they're not lying to you, they're not staying out all night, they're not calling other women, then you can say, okay, maybe that was more attributed to abuse. But if there's still the control there, right, that's the piece that doesn't really go away just with the addiction.
Exactly.
The belief that you're an object to control and to use and to exploit. That will always be there if it's a true pathological person.
Because just putting down a drink or a drug, if it's actually a pathological personality,
No,
not enough. It might make it a little less severe at first, but it's still not enough to really address what's going on.
no, no. And here's the thing, people have to, it's a big question people always say to me, can these people change, right? And so I say they can, not all can, and most don't, but some people do, but they have to want to change.
And that's one of the most important things, wanting to, being able to admit they have an issue.
Right, that's right. Because half the time they don't admit they have an issue. So if you don't have an issue, how can you change the issue you don't have? And if they're continually blaming you, because they love to victim signal and they love to make it everybody else's fault. And a big piece of that is because when they feel negative emotions like frustration or sadness or anger, instead of getting reflective or thinking about how the situation occurred or what their part might have been, they automatically say it's your fault. Right. So somebody who's not reflective, how could they change?
Right. I think one of the things that stands out to me also is, and you say this too, if they're just so hostile and antagonistic, and they'll always give you the least charitable interpretation of everything, and they're on the attack. There is no attempt to mutually understand,
Yes.
collaborate, problem solve. It
Yes.
always feels like a battle with them.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yeah, they don't have a the collaborative part of their brain is not is not online. It's not active. Well, because they always want to win. They feel entitled to win. They feel superior. And yeah, they often lack a moral compass. And so, and they think everybody is like them. So everybody is the enemy. Right. And I remember thinking that, wanting to say that to my ex, like, look at me, it's me. I'm not the enemy here. You don't need to fight me. But that's a perception that they have.
Right. They just, yeah, they're not good at being on the same team as someone. Like, no, we're on the same team here. I'm not out to get you,
Right.
prove you wrong in every way, point out your every shortcoming and amplify it. That's not what I'm trying to do here.
No, no, but they do that, and they justify it by thinking like everybody does that.
Yeah. And I was talking to a diagnosed narcissist the other day, the Bat Wolf. I don't know if you're familiar with him or you've seen him in your travels, but that's what he said that he does. He will project what he thinks everyone else will be like, and he'll basically assume they're going to be like that. Oh,
That's
I
right.
would be doing this, so I bet they're doing this. But
Right.
it's really just a projection.
Right. And it's the same way it goes the other way too. It's like, I think everybody's trusting and loving and kind. Right. So we all project all day long till, we realize we're doing it. But even me as a trained therapist who knows it still does it. Like, we just can't not do that. But being aware of it and is very important. And especially what I think makes these people different is their intention behind their behavior.
Yeah, because it's the power and control part that they're really trying to emphasize.
Yeah, and the selfishness, the selfish intention, and the need to control is very different than just a general intention of meeting somebody and wanting to communicate with them and share the rest of your life with them.
All right. And I think it's so important to mention what you just said too. When someone expects people to be good like them, oh, I would try to be this understanding. I would try to be this helpful. I would try to have be a good person in this situation, and expecting other people to do that, that can get people into a lot of trouble with those pathological lovers.
A lot. Yes.
Yeah, and they get torn through the mud in those cases, and it's really tragic.
No, it is tragic because it can destroy people. People really feel, the women I work with, I mean, are devastated by it. And then if you throw in children and families, the wreckage is severe.
Mm.
That's why I wrote my book.
Yeah, and it was everyone should check it out. Her book's called Run Like Hell as well, by the way. I think a lot of people have read it. It's got a lot of great reviews, but if you haven't, you should definitely check it out.
Yes, thank you.
And when you're counseling or doing therapy now, I mean, what kinds of issues do you see pop up for people? What are the things that you see women or men, if you see men too, what are they struggling with most?
So, a lot of times, ironically, what they're struggling with is, even if they've left this pathological lover, they still long for them.
Mm.
Even if they know that this person is really kryptonite, it's very, very dangerous for them, they still long for them. So it's hard enough to long for them, then they feel shame about it. But it's actually normal because your body has been biochemically conditioned with that intermittent reinforcement. So your tormentor was also your soother. So now when you've left and you're feeling all negative emotions, your soother's not there anymore.
Mm.
Right?
Right.
No, yeah, go ahead. And then you can also really miss the drama. You can miss the trauma activated euphoria that you get from this manufactured, intense, crazy relationship.
Right. I think our mutual friend Vanessa M. Reiser, she calls it the wound soothe cycle. I think she calls it.
Yes, she does. Yes, yes, yes. It's so that's so they really do miss their lover. They feel a lot of shame for being in the relationship, for tolerating the abuse. They feel, let's see what else, a lot of hopelessness about their future. They feel often a lot of fear. They might still fear their ex, especially if they've had like physical violence and temporary restraining orders. So they have a myriad of CPTSD symptoms. They can be hypervigilant. If they're used to being threatened all the time, right? They think everything around them is threatening. Or they can be very depressed because they've had to depress themselves to be in this relationship. So, and they still have cognitive dissonance, as I mentioned, wondering why, like thinking, still loving their partner. My God, there's so many symptoms they could have. I could go on and on, but the three symptoms are loss of self, cognitive dissonance, and then CPTSD symptoms. So 100% of people get loss of self and CPTSD, and cognitive dissonance. 50 to 70% get CPTSD symptoms. So that's a lot.
Absolutely. And I think people have to understand too, the trauma bond is just like a drug addiction in
Yeah.
the brain, and people will go through the withdrawal. And I think that's what confuses people too. They think, oh, this was an abusive relationship. How can you be missing and in withdrawal from an abusive relationship?
Yeah, but you're missing it because you're missing the dopamine and oxytocin rush.
Right.
Because it's really because the intensity of the relationship is so extreme. It's kind of a manufactured high like cocaine. Right? But you can't live on cocaine and it's unsustainable.
No, no.
Right? Choose chocolate.
Dark chocolate, not
right?
70% cacao and above. Very good for you.
Chocolate, right? Because that's like a sustainable thing. But we want the real high, like Coke. And especially if let's just think you're a recovering addict and you fall in love in a trauma bond, that can even be harder for you because you have more of an addictive personality.
Right. And that happens a lot too. I see that happen a lot as well.
It happens a lot. We're so complex as human beings. That's why I had to go to school for 7 years.
That's great though. I mean, I love to learn. I love learning about this stuff.
Yeah, it's fun. I agree.
And I think even exercise, like getting out in nature, getting involved in the community,
Huge.
that's all things that help us as well. And that's kind of what we all have here online with YouTube and Instagram. It's a community of people.
We do. And I actually just started a survivor community. So what I did is I took my book and I created a course where people can go deeper. And I created an online community called Survivor, where women can take my course, and I run support groups 3 to 4 times a week.
And where can they find those?
So it's called Survivor. So you can just Google it or go to my website, drnae.com, and just go there and click on the community link. And it's $30 a month because therapy with me is expensive and I wanted to reach more people. And, just what you mentioned about community is so important. The women feel so validated and seen and heard. And it's helping them heal much quicker because we can't heal alone in isolation.
Correct. I think that the community piece, it is so healing. Just to know they're not alone and they can talk to people that understand. They're not going to throw around where's your accountability? Where's your responsibility lines that I see so many people say that are just obnoxious.
That's right. And I have practical tools in there like worksheets and guided meditations and journal prompts and things to really, because when you leave the trauma bond, you really need to attack it on all levels because it is that addiction and it can be really hard. You have the addiction piece, you have all these symptoms, you have people telling you, why don't you just get over it? So it really needs a multi-pronged approach to heal it.
I think, and like you said, 2 things. One of the biggest things I hear women tell me about it is they have that euphoric recall and they really want to go back. So when a woman or man is in that spot, what do you say to them, or what are the action steps to get them through that?
So what I say to them is that, first of all, I think I might have my healing withdrawal worksheet here. So
there you go.
So what I say to them is that I'm going to say something very hard to you. And I want to say this to you very kindly. The Romeo, the loving part, was just a manipulation. You weren't in love with 2 people. You thought you were in love, but you were in love with one pathological manipulative person. And so I give them tons of exercises to start to see this person as one manipulative person. And it's hard because that's painful. And then what I do is and I have it here, We go over their withdrawal thoughts, and I give them neurobiological framework, reframe, and I'll give you one. Nobody will ever understand me like they do. So what's a neurobiological reframe? My brain formed unique neural pathways in response to their unpredictable behavior, creating an illusion of special connection.
I love that.
Yeah. So we go over the withdrawal thoughts, and then we do the neurobiological reframe. And so these are tangible steps that they can take to start to reframe this whole crazy experience.
Because you know what? One of the last women I was talking to about this, that's exactly the terminology she even used. No one's going to love me like that. No one's going to understand me like the way he did. But to truly understand the person that you thought they were, that's just a mirage. It's the apparition, the ghost.
Right, that's correct.
It's just that person didn't exist. And for me, that really helped understanding, no, that was just a ghost that they were pretending to be whoever they needed to be to get what they wanted from me.
Yes, in that moment. Exactly. Exactly. So we really work on that. And then also, you know, in the community, I just hold the space and let them cry about it. Sometimes that just works too, you know, being able to process your feelings without judgment.
Right. Got to feel it to heal it, they say.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Instead of fighting it, I think that's the problem a lot of people do. They really fight it. And I say, sometimes you just got to own it. Own it. Yeah, you feel that way, and that's fine.
Yeah, and your feelings, I'd say, you know, they're there for a reason. They're your internal compass. And you can't judge, dismiss, or deny them. They don't go away. They're energy in motion. So what happens is they stay stuck in the body and they manifest as anxiety and depression. But when we feel our feelings, don't judge them, receive them, be with them, miraculously, they do resolve.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big thing not taking ourselves so seriously with it as well. I think whenever I struggle, that's one of the things that I'm doing. I'm almost always taking life too seriously. The humor goes, I'm no longer playful, I'm no longer lighthearted, everything's just so serious. But taking that step back, and it's really hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, but it's like the most difficult thing you'll ever do. But to try to shift the energy to be a little more playful, a little more lighthearted, and just try. It's helpful.
It's helpful, and I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, as I write about self-compassion is a huge part of healing from this trauma bond. So you've already been beat up and abused. Don't do it to yourself. And so self-compassion is simply, I'm suffering. There are millions of women in the world suffering in trauma bonds. Speak to yourself as you would speak to one of them or a good friend.
That's great advice. I mean, it's like they say, you want to treat yourself the way you would someone you really care about. That's why I love that.
Yeah, and it works. And there's so much research on it, you know, that it really, really, really works. And I do it for myself all the time. I don't take myself seriously at all, you know, unless I have to like present or something, you know, but I mean, because we're just humans and we make mistakes and we're full of flaws. And that's, I think, actually what, to a point, what makes us interesting till it tips to pathology.
Right. And you're from New York, one of my favorite comedians, Tim Dillon, Long Island Tim Dillon. He's got that kind of dark, cynical sense of humor that I would love. So just listening to him sometimes, especially his older episodes, it would snap me out of those negative, taking myself too seriously jolts. Priceless, really. Priceless stuff.
Comedy is such a great, laughter is such a great healer.
Well, one of the best medicines.
It is.
Absolutely one of the best. And I think for the other people who are struggling with that trauma bond, getting through the euphoric recall, another thing I have people do is tell them to write down all the awful ways they've been treated, so that when you are feeling that way, remind yourself, fast forward the tapes. This is what it really is. You can't have one without the other. They're going to get both.
Right. You got to go back to facts. Right. You got to go back to facts and write out all the horrible things that they did. Put it on your mirror.
Yeah. Now, what happens with the people that, if they consistently attract these kinds of people? Because I do think that's a little bit of a different issue at that point, because I think this can happen to anyone. But if you consistently are doing it, what do you say to people in that situation?
Yeah, so if you're consistently doing it, that's when you really got to get yourself into therapy. And you need, no matter what, when you left a trauma bond, you need to turn the mirror back on you and you need to learn about yourself. So what are your attachment patterns? What was your early life experiencing, right? What level of developmental trauma did you experience? Was it emotional abuse? Was it neglect? Was it sexual abuse, physical abuse, right? That's all. Were your parents intermittently abusive, right? So it's very important to understand how your early development and your attachment patterns mixed with your personality traits could prime you for this sort of relationship.
Right. Especially the people that had a narcissistic parent, that's the initial trauma bond. Like that's they conditioned you to associate the behaviors of a narcissist or a borderline or whomever with love. And so when you see that in adulthood, you're like, oh, this feels like home.
Yeah, I mean, the root word of family and familiar is the same for a reason.
That's a good point too.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, of course, it's very important just in general to understand how we're wired,
Right. I mean,
especially if it keeps happening.
yeah. And I think it's also important to mention what you said in there too, where to take a look at our side is not synonymous with blame or not synonymous with no, what happened to you is your fault. And I think it's important the timing and when we do that too. It's like if someone's just getting out of an abusive relationship, we're not going to say to them, "Where's your responsibility? Where's your accountability? What's your part?" Like no,
Right.
but down the line, especially if it's someone that continues to attract those kinds of people,
That's correct.
then it's a different story. You can gently bring it up and say, "No, it's not your fault how they treated you, but
Yeah.
if this is a pattern, probably means we have to do something different here."
Yeah. And usually the pain of heartbreak sends us running to therapy.
Pain's one of the biggest precursors to a lot of growth for people.
It is. Well, the body and brain can only grow really from threat.
Is that so? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, initially for these big breakthroughs, because otherwise we would have no motivation.
That's a good point.
Nobody comes in like, hey, Dr. I'm having the best day and just decided to show up and see. You know, no, it's like, my life is a no. That's why they come, because life has brought them to their knees. And it's good because then you're open to change, right? You might be more rigid and not as open to change. But when life brings you to your knees, you're like, do me anything to get out of this.
Right.
Anything is knowledge.
Right. I mean, that's why they say in AA and NA, the gift of desperation.
Yeah.
That's what it is for people, right? They hit that bottom, and there's many different versions of a bottom that can be in relationships, addictions, or whatever, mental health. But that bottom can force people into action.
That's right. It can.
And that's the gift. That's the gift of it doesn't feel that way in the moment. But looking back on it, you can say, oh, yeah, okay. I didn't like it at the time, but it did get me into gear. It did get my ass in gear to do something different.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's not toxic positivity. I mean, that's real.
Yeah, and that's another thing I like to talk about too, because there is such a thing as toxic positivity. And I think for me, it's when they're truly invalidating others and saying, no, just stuff it and do this. It's like, no, it's possible to validate and still say, okay, like you can still try to have this mindset and do what's best for you and a good attitude without invalidating too.
That's right. That's right. And not telling people to get over it, or it's not so bad, or somebody has it worse, right? And just telling somebody, but don't worry, there'll be brighter days. No, I think what happens in society is that we're afraid to validate negative feelings because we're afraid that we'll stay in there forever. But actually, when you validate somebody's negative feelings, is what allows them to come out of it.
That's a great point too, I think. And that's why we focus on that in the beginning. We focus on the validation, empowerment, education, because then it builds them up. It builds them up to a place where they're able to do what's best for them.
Correct. Very well said. Yes.
And I think another great thing in your life is, and this is a great example for other people too, that you've been able to find a happy and healthy relationship. You've been able to find love. And that's something I hear people say, oh, I've given up. I've given up on love.
No.
And they get cynical about it. And some of it's understandable. But
yeah.
What would you say to people in that spot?
Well, I mean, that's a very personal choice. I love, hence my relationship. Like I'm obsessed with love and relationships, and it just to me is what makes life worth living. So that's why I've made my whole life about helping people with relationships. I'm in relationship with all my patients. So I just say, don't give up, but just get educated so you can become empowered. And it's possible. It's totally possible if that's what you want. If that's what you want. But that's just a very personal choice. I would never like put that on anybody. That's just my modus operandi. I just like to love.
Right. I mean, and I totally understand the people who feel that way,
Yeah.
whether it's a man or a woman.
Yeah.
But what I try to say to them is, you feel this way now,
That's
but
right.
it
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're going to feel this way forever. You might think you will,
Yeah.
but most feelings will eventually pass. And there's no problem if it doesn't either. Like, if you just don't want to be in a relationship, there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that. But here's the thing, like you say, change is inevitable. That's the one thing.
Well, here's another one. Do you know the divorce lawyer, James Sexton?
I do.
Okay. So he probably does a lot of cases that you would be familiar with, probably. But he says something I really like. He says that you can't get like the joys of love and get to that next level without taking that risk. Like, there's got to be some risk involved to
Yeah.
get to those higher heights. And without the risk, yeah, you're not going to get hurt. But then you're also not going to get that, like, some of the magical parts of life.
That's right. Without, that's just, I think, not even just for relationships. I think that's just for life in general. If you don't have the courage to face your fear and take risks, you can't reach your potential in anything.
All right. And that reminds me of November Rain by Guns N' Roses. And he said, what did he say? One of the lyrics is something along the lines of, even when your friends are out to harm you, I know it's hard to keep an open heart when even friends are out to harm you. And I'm like, okay, that reminds me a lot of what happens to people after an abusive relationship. They
Yeah,
close off.
yeah, your heart closes. Your heart closes, but it doesn't have to stay closed forever.
All right. I think that's where owning it comes in. It's okay, you feel that way now. Own that.
Right.
Own
That's
it. And maybe you won't feel that way forever, but maybe you
right.
will.
Without judgment. Right. Could just because the more you resist it, the more you might feel it. But just giving yourself permission to be where you're at, wherever you're at.
Right. Another thing you mentioned in your book was the Tinder swindler. I don't hear as much about him anymore, but you mentioned him as having antisocial traits, I think you said.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm trying to remember him, but I think he presented himself as one way and then just swindled these women, right? Out of so much money. I'm trying to remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's real psychopathy, right? Because the psychopath has short-term exploitative mating habits and they have high stress immunity. Meanwhile, they can be in the most stressful situations doing things like that, stealing from people and not even break a sweat. They can just do it calm as that's why, people love James Bond, right? He can do all those things calm as a cucumber. So yeah, that's a prime example of such malevolent intention, knowing that you're setting up these people to steal from them.
I think it confuses people that they just have that empathy impairment. It confuses people that someone could do something so harmful and then not feel guilt and remorse about it.
But that's the whole piece of it. They don't feel remorse, empathy, or compassion, and there are evil people in the world.
That's not a good one. So evil people would be, because this is another debate. A lot of people debate this topic in the space here. I talked to Dr. Salerno about it, and there's
Yeah.
not that many doctors that say much about it, and I understand why. But I mean, what do you think an evil person is?
Well, just the people that I describe. I mean, a pathological person, I think a lot of times is very evil. Because what does evil mean? I haven't thought about the definition of evil, but I'm assuming it means harm, like intentional harm.
I think that's a good definition.
Right?
Intentional harm without any care is what I would say.
Yeah, without any care. And so I know as a 57-year-old woman, there are many evil people in the world. All we have to do is look in the news. P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever his name is, Sean Combs, whatever you want to call him, Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, these people hurt hundreds of people, all for selfish reasons. To me, that's insane. And there were people that watched and helped and collaborated. So there are evil people in the world. That's okay, though. The light triad's going to win. Don't worry.
Mm. That's a good point to mention there too. All of the enablers and the flying monkeys of people such as Harvey Weinstein, P. Diddy, fill in the blank, they allow it to continue.
Yeah, they're part of it. And that's where, that's what I talk about in trauma bond is that power imbalance. That's really important to bring that up because they develop more and more and more power. And then, but what happens is they abuse their power and they exploit all the people around them and use all the people around them in various ways. Either they pay them off or bribe them or threaten them, videotape them doing terrible things, right? And can extort them. So it's not so simple, but they're doing that. And I mean, the fact that P. Diddy got away with that for 30 years, that burns a hole in my stomach that is it just makes me wild. But this is why I do the work that I do, because the only weapon we have against that is education.
Yeah.
And knowledge and talking about it.
Right. And do you think, like Jordan, did he have a lot of flying monkeys and enablers around him?
Yeah, he had all the Stratton guys. He
Yeah.
was the king. He is the king. He had the Midas touch, and they all adored him.
And how did they play a role in the whole dynamic? It's probably invalidating just to even have them around him, and they probably like validated his perceptions of reality, etc.
I just think, they were just all in it together and just yes men and those sorts of people, when you question them or if you really challenge their power or have different opinions or thoughts than them, you're out. Right? So birds of a feather flock together.
Right. I mean, because people like that, they perceive disagreements as attacks. And if you don't agree with them, you don't mirror back to them what they want you to mirror back to them. They
Right.
don't have time for you. See you
Right.
later.
Right. It's that fragile self-esteem.
And that's another thing I think I've seen you talk to Dr. Salerno, and he mentions how they're not all just overcoming or overcompensating for low self-esteem and insecurities. Like, no, they got inflated sense of self-worth a lot of time.
Yes.
What do you think about that aspect?
I believe that. Yeah. So the way he talks about it, and I agree, is that fragile self-esteem is embedded within an entitled sense of self, which seems paradoxical. Hence why they're so confusing. Because wait, you think you're God, you think you're the best person in the world. You walk around with your chest puffed out and you're charming and magnanimous, but somebody says a little something you take the wrong way, you go into a rage. And right, so those are prime examples of how those two things can go together.
Right. Inflated but fragile, I think is a good way to put it. And you could argue, though, that people would say, well, how high is it if it's so fragile? And to which I would say, that's a good point, but it is still inflated. That's the important part.
Yeah, and it's entitled is a belief that you're above everything and you're special and that you deserve things that other people don't deserve. Right? So that's really what that means. And then you combine that with, so if I don't get exactly what I want when I want, I'm going to rage. So there's this term called humiliated fury, which is a mix of anger, rage, and shame. So we're not saying that there's not any shame there, right? We're not saying that, but it's just more complicated than just saying they're just entitled. It's a mixture of a bunch of things. It's a cauldron of things that create this complex personality.
Right. And where do you stand on the nature versus nurture part of narcissism?
Yeah, well, Peter and I are friends, and I loved his book, and him and I laughed because, like most people, I was a little bit like, wait, this isn't what we thought. But I do agree with him, and I do agree that it's biopsychosocial, that there's a biological component, a psychological component. Because he's not saying there's not a psychological component, but there's also a social cultural component.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's in tandem.
Yeah,
in tandem. And I think there's a reason why everyone that maybe had a narcissistic parent or experienced childhood trauma, there's a reason why they're not all narcissists or borderlines
that's right.
or pathological lovers.
And you know, the thing is that we are so complex. So it's not like A plus B equals C. There's multiple causality for these things. But my own mother was raised by an alcoholic and a schizophrenic, and I was not abused.
Hmm.
There we go.
See, and that's a good testament right there to that whole too. That there's many factors. All of this stuff is many factors coming into play,
That's
and
right.
it's really difficult to pinpoint. Nope, it was specifically this, or it was specifically someone that was putting their children on a pedestal. That's what caused NPD. It's like no, okay. Like it can contribute perhaps, but that's not like going to be the sole cause.
Yeah, and I think that we also have to, like I'm saying, if you've been in a trauma bond, you don't have to get a psychology degree in narcissism. Like you need to get a psychology degree in yourself. You need to become your own science experiment. And you need to go out and live in the relational lab. And you need to really understand yourself because here's the thing, you're the only person you can control. And you're the most important project you'll ever work on. So that's why it's so important to invest in yourself.
I think that's something that gets lost in our community sometimes. I think people just focus on the toxic behaviors and the narcissist and the dark triad, dark tetrad, but it's just as important, if not more, to be looking at our side and trying to improve ourselves, notice our own toxic behaviors if we have them. I mean, and everyone's not perfect, so.
Of course, everybody has shadow sides. Everybody. I mean, it'd be ridiculous to say that we didn't. But yeah, I think that's what does get lost. And that's why my first module in my course is literally called Turn the Mirror Back on You.
I like that. I mean, it's so important, but people so often they just confuse that with you're blaming the victim or you're telling them where's your accountability. And it's like, no, more than one thing is true at the same time. It's like
That's right. That's right.
it's
Yeah.
not your fault, but it doesn't mean we're perfect. There's not because imagine I think it's really disempowering to say also, no, there's nothing you can do. You were just perfect and
Right.
it's all them. So what is that saying when you say that? You're saying you're more likely to be a victim again. There's nothing you could do.
That's right.
You're just at the universe's mercy. It's like, I don't buy that. It's like, no, I call it practicing radical self-respect, but there's many other ways to do it too. But it's
Yeah.
like you empower yourself. And then once you're aware, you have the education. I call it the 3 E's: educate, empower, and what's the other one I have? Encourage. So those three, like that's what you do. And it helps. It helps.
It does help. It does help. I mean, listen, I went to school for 7 years, then took a 3-year postdoc training in a theory called the Neuro-affective Relational Model. Been in therapy for 25 years. I'm not in therapy finally anymore. And it's been a lifelong journey of learning. And it never ends, really, because I still learn every single day, like in these conversations. And my patients teach me so much. My children teach me so much. I'm always researching. But yeah, you're an important project to work on.
Right. I mean, you mentioned the neuro relationship model. Is that what it's called?
Affective relational model. Yes.
And that was your postdoctoral
Yes.
certificate or degree?
Yeah. So what I did is after I got my Ph.D. in somatic psychotherapy, I went and took a clinical training in that theory because it really worked. It was based on Peter Levine's somatic experiencing. And then instead of looking at trauma as shock trauma, they used body clinical applications to help heal developmental trauma. And so
Interesting.
I took a 3-year training on that, which really honestly was better than all my schooling, honestly.
I could see that. And so, what was the best part about that? What would you learn from that program?
The best part about that was, first of all, I learned a lot more about developmental trauma, how to categorize people, non-pathologizing them. He uses Alexander Lowen's model, so it's from the 1950s, And so I categorize people based upon the years that they experienced their developmental trauma and the resource they didn't get. And I explain to them that you have these adaptive survival styles that you had to use as a child that allowed you to survive, but they're no longer serving you. So let's work on now giving you new ways to survive or thrive that are healthier. And so there's many ways we do that. What mind body interventions. So it just really taught me a lot, and it deepens my understanding of psychology. And in fact, my teacher, Dr. Larry Heller, shout out to him. He's the creator of the model. Him and I just did a talk for like an hour and a half, and that was very surreal.
Can people watch that?
It's going to come out. Yeah, it's going to come out. I'll post about it. So that was like wild.
Oh, I love that. I mean, is this similar to how I know I used to go to places like AA and NA, and they said, like, when you look at your shortcomings and character defects, they were all doing something for you, or
Yeah,
they were survival adaptations.
exactly.
And what you learned in that program, it's similar to that.
Yes, very similar. That their defenses, we usually call them defenses in psychology. He calls them adaptive survival styles. And they just allowed you to survive, but we get rigid with them and we use them too much and they're maladaptive. And that's why people come to therapy, because they're no longer working.
That makes perfect sense, actually. And I think the awareness of that
Yes,
is humongous. The awareness that someone is doing them, and the awareness of our shadows too, because I really love shadow work as well. So I think that's also fascinating.
yeah, that's Carl Jung. Yeah, that's very important. We all have light and shadow, and getting to know our shadows, and I mean whatever our tendencies are. Like my personal favorite is retail shopping, but well, my credit card doesn't like that. I notice when I'm upset, I'm like, I'm going to go right to the store, get a little dopamine hit.
I think we all have something. I mean, my philosophy has been, I think everyone uses something. The only variables are what they use and how frequently they do it.
That's
And of
right.
course, there's certain ones that are more harmful than others, of course. But
That's right. But we're always learning how to be an experience into food, into substance, into video games, into music, into right. How do we have a balance with all these different things that we're interacting with in the world? I mean,
right.
that's the journey of a lifetime.
I think I would also be very curious for you, as you see the world progress here and how it is for younger people now and they're like teens into younger 20s. What do you foresee as some of the issues and some of the pitfalls coming up here in this social media era?
Yeah, I mean, I first of all, I love social media because of the way you and I use it. I think it's a beautiful thing that connects people and really can educate people and bring all of these things that have been in the shadows, right? All these dark tetrad individuals and all their behaviors have been like the mice in the attic. And so we've been able to illuminate a light on them and bring them to people's awareness. So I think in that way, it's wonderful. Just like everything, it has its shadow side. And I think the constant comparison of people's lives, because it's a curated life on social media, the lack of knowing how to have an actual conversation with the person in front of me without being like this, right? So, I mean, I'm sure that that's going to affect, people to come, but I really don't know exactly how. But I'm not as worried about it because everybody said, the car was going to destroy us after the horse and buggy. Everybody said the radio was going to destroy us. Everybody said the TV was going to destroy us. So we're always saying all these things are going to destroy us. But my belief is that humans are much more adaptive than we give them credit for, and we're going to figure it out.
I think you have a good point with that. I also think we are both old enough, though, to know, like, to me, I see life in two parts. I see it as in pre-smartphone social media and
Yes.
then post-smartphones and social media. It's like a human, and
Human-
it gets confusing because some of it I get mixed up with, nostalgia from the 90s music and the 80s music, the stuff I grew up with. And
Right.
it's like, did I just think it was better because I'm thinking of like memories of when I had less responsibility? Or
Yes.
was it truly different and better? I don't know.
Well, I think anything that we associate with that special time of coming of age, we have nostalgia for.
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean, I
yeah,
one of my favorite hobbies is I go on YouTube and just like read the comments of songs of like things I grew up with, because the cool part about it is you everyone shares their memories because with the song, because there's something about music and the sense of smell.
yes,
They're
that's
like
what I got.
the closest thing to magic in a time machine there is, if you ask me.
They are, they are. I know. Trust me. Whenever I listen to Madonna, I'm 16 again.
Yeah. And people, she's been coming around again because everyone on TikTok had that live to tell little trend they had going on there. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't even see that. No, but yeah, Madonna. She looks a little strange on TikTok. I try not to go, even though I love you, Madonna. No, no shade, but yeah, no, it takes me right back. But I did not see that trend. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me. You can hear one chord or riff from a guitar, and all of a sudden, boom,
You're back.
you're back somewhere.
You're back. It's so true. It's so true.
And
And
so I love doing that. I love looking at the comments and reading people's memories and what they identify and relate to the songs.
well,
And
you're
again,
sentimental. Are you very sentimental?
I would say, I can be an old soul, I guess.
Yeah, that's nice.
So I mean, I've always gotten along better with people that are older than me. That's always been my thing. I've talked to a lot of guys that were 10, 20 years older than me. Um, and there's probably various reasons for that, but I've done things like I was a taxi driver in New Jersey for years before Uber and Lyft came around. That was a wild experience. And I would talk to all the older taxi drivers. As as a person in psychology, you would love that kind of job, talking to all the different kinds of people that would come in,
Yes,
and it was fascinating to me.
that's cool.
So, Dr. Nay, is there anything else you wanted to address in particular here?
No, I think we've had a lovely conversation, and I think we've covered it all, and I've really enjoyed it. And I think you've asked a lot of poignant questions and brought up a lot of really important points.
Well, I'm really happy that you came on the show here, and I can't wait to get this out for people so they can check it out and learn from you. And they should check out your book, Run Like Hell,
Yeah.
and your new course coming out in your new community.
Yes, and I'm going to send you a the first chapter of my book for free for your listeners for the show.
Oh, right on. I appreciate that.
Yeah, let's do that. All right.
Awesome. Thank you again, Dr. Nay, so much for spending the afternoon here with me.
Thank you so much.
All righty. You have a good one.
Okay.
Thanks.